Hey, YouTubers, welcome to Theology Thursdays. I'm Nathan Stell. I'm joined by Laura Stell, and this is where we talk about the upcoming Sunday's Mass readings in the Roman Catholic Church, and we discuss how they have to do with each other and what they mean for the rest of our lives. So I'm looking at the readings here. Have you read the readings?
Yes.
Have you gotten a chance to look at them?
Yes.
Yeah, and just essentially, if you haven't read the readings, real quick. This is the second Sunday of Easter, and in the season of Easter, which lasts 50 days, all the readings are from the New Testament. Is that right?
Except for the psalm.
Except for the psalm, right? Except for the responsorial psalm, because it comes from the book of Psalms, which is in the Old Testament. So the first reading comes from Acts, and it's basically just painting a picture of the very earliest Christian communities after Jesus dies and then rises again, and it's basically showing this picture of a very socialist community where everybody is either selling what they have and then giving the proceeds to the greater community, for the community to dish out according to people's needs. Or where people are giving the community what they have. If they have land or they have food or whatever, they're giving it to the greater community. And then again, the community and the disciples are deciding how it should be doled out to everybody in the community. So it's a very socialist existence, and this is the picture that the Bible shows us is how the first Christians lived. And then the second reading is from the first epistle of John, and this is different than the Gospel of John. There's the Gospel of John, and then there's the epistles of John, and there's 3 of them, and this is from the first one. And it's basically having to do with love and obedience. Saying if we love God, we are going to be obedient to Him. We will in fact conquer the world. Those who are begotten of God are those who love Him. Those who are begotten of God will conquer the world, and conquer the snares of the world. And then the Gospel from John also. The Gospel from John is the picture before, like right after the crucifixion of Jesus, right? And Jesus, the disciples are in this room and the doors are locked, and they're afraid because they're afraid that they're going to be next and they're going to be taken and killed like Jesus was. And Jesus visits them, tells them not to be afraid. And this is the story of doubting Thomas, right? Thomas he's not there the first time, so they all see Jesus. He visits them, and then they tell Thomas about it, and Thomas doesn't believe him. He says, "I'm not going to believe you unless I see this guy with holes in his hands and in his feet." And so Jesus comes again when Thomas is there, presents himself to Thomas, and says, "Hey, Thomas, now that I'm showing you my hands and my feet, now you believe me. Blessed are those who don't believe." And at the very end, it says, Jesus did a lot more things so that they would believe. But the things that are written are so that we believe. We who weren't in that room, we who didn't physically see Jesus 2,000 years ago with the holes in his hands and in his feet, the things that are written are these eyewitness accounts so that we can believe in the resurrection of Jesus, which we celebrate not only all year, but especially in the season of Easter. So usually I have some thoughts, and I have some thoughts now too, but maybe we can change it up just a little bit and open it up, and we can discuss a little bit, and if we get around to what I was thinking, we can, and then I'll share that.
Okay. One of the
not to put you on the spot though, but
as I was reading this, and then as you were summarizing the gospel, Thomas has always been characterized as doubting Thomas, like he was different from the other apostles. But if you read this gospel excerpt that you're referring to from John, it says that when Jesus walked in and Thomas wasn't there, he showed the rest of them his hands and his side, so they all saw. So Thomas may not have been any different from anybody else, and certainly, we all have a problem with truly believing in anything for a long time, consistently, because we are human and we doubt, and doubts come and go, and I think that's a real part of our faith, of the growing of our faith, that we somehow have to deal with those doubts and God willing, get back to believing again.
Yeah, yeah. And I remember reading someplace or hearing someplace talking about those doubts that you're mentioning. Like that's exactly why we do all the rituals that we do as a Catholic Church, because we forget, like we totally forget, you know. Um, um, I remember I was the other day, like during Holy Week, one of the days, I think, I was praying. I was praying the Rosary, and as I was praying, I had some thoughts that I wanted to remember. Right, some things that I felt, oh, this is kind of like, kind of God telling me certain things, and things that I should do, and remember. And I wrote them down, because if I hadn't written them down, I would totally forget, like
Okay.
probably all of them. And even though I wrote them down, I wrote them on this whiteboard that I have in the living room. They're there still. And even though I wrote them down, and even though I've looked at them maybe every day or every other day since then, I still couldn't tell you what they all are right now. Like they go away, like these things go away and other things replace them, right, in our heads. So we have to build up these rituals in order to remember the important things that we're supposed to remember. And we do it in our secular life, and we do it in our religious life, and it's just a thing, like as human beings. That's why we have the Eucharist. That's why we have church on Sundays. That's why we have, like, everything that we do with any kind of frequency, we do it because we'll forget otherwise. And that's just kind of the way we're built.
And I think also the beauty of the ritual is that since we don't do it all, like Sunday Mass tends to become very boring for a lot of people because it seems to be the same, basically. But these special rituals of having the Holy Week only one week out of the year, Easter one day, then there's a buildup, and there really is a renewal of that spirit, a renewal of that joy, a renewal of this is who we are, identifying ourselves as a people, the people of God, or the new Israel, if you will. And so that builds up, and it's like a climax of the whole year, right? But it serves so much more, as you're saying, to actually bring us back to that first love, that as Christians that we tend to take for granted as we settle into the ordinary of the year, and it feels like same old in many ways, unless you're really paying attention to what's going on.
Yeah, definitely. The thing that really struck, it's kind of. I heard that the first churches celebrated Easter week. That was their celebration every week. They say every week, and so
which is why Sunday is the day we celebrate.
And they probably baptize people every week too. I don't know. Which is why what?
Which is why they changed from celebrating on the Sabbath to Sunday, because they were celebrating.
Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. Because they were celebrating the resurrection on Sunday, right? But it really struck me reading the readings. It really struck me like the first reading, and the way that they lived, and the way that they shared everything, and how that's in such contrast, stark contrast to the way that we live today. Mm-hmm. Especially in the United States, we don't live in a socialist country at all. And I'm not trying to start a political movement here, but or promote a political movement necessarily. But it's really interesting. Ourselves a Christian nation, right? But we do not at all act the way that the disciples and the first Christians acted in Acts at all. We don't live this life of sharing, and of taking care of people, and of considering the whole of the community above even our own good, and so I was thinking that, again, trying to, I'm always trying to relate the readings to each other, and thinking the sharing when we with ourselves. And what's that?
I can't hear. You're breaking up. I don't know what you're saying.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, the first reading and how they were sharing everything, like, mm-hmm. we do that at times in our lives. We do share, and we do take care of people, but we're only really okay giving up our stuff when we're okay with ourselves, feel comfortable and confident that we're going to be okay, that the stuff we're giving is not something that's very necessary in our lives, right? And we're mostly comfortable with that when we trust that we already have enough. Like, I already have enough, so I'm going to give you what I don't need, right? But these were people that were giving everything. They were giving all that they had. They were God provide what they actually needed, even though they were giving everything to the community. And we do trust God also, you know, but we trust God mostly when we know Christ. Christians, as post-resurrection Christians, you know, as 2,000 years after the resurrection Christians, we trust God when we know Christ. And the link between those that I see of knowing God and knowing Christ is, and not just the theological idea that Christ is God and God is Jesus, not just that, but like, we can see Christ. We can see that he was born. We can see that he grew up. He had a childhood. He had furs, and he healed people. Things like the gospel mentions. We have all these things that we can read that show us what Jesus was like and what he did, that he was killed, that he rose up from that death. And these are things that people witnessed to and they wrote, and we can experience that. And then like we were saying before, we then build up all these rituals so that we don't Jesus. We build up going to Mass and experiencing the Eucharist and the sacrament and all those things that we do as Catholics to remind us of who Jesus is. Because Jesus, we remember God. And Jesus is to know, and really to know God. And in that way, yes. And so that's for me, that's kind of the way that the theological idea of Jesus being God works out in my life. You know, when I'm aware of the Eucharist, in the sacraments, in other people, that's my experience, the presence of Christ, my openness to him. And I was thinking about Jesus 2,000 years ago. The people. Oh, can you? Okay, can you hear me now?
I'm hearing you now, but there was a period of silence after experiencing Jesus through community.
Okay, well, that's right. I was just, okay, so you can hear me, yeah? All right. I was just thinking that the people who killed Jesus did it, and not just the high priests and not just Pontius Pilate, but like the people that were for killing Jesus did it because they didn't know God, you know? Even if they knew the law and they knew the Torah and they knew the scriptures, but they didn't have this experience of God in their hearts that allowed them to see Jesus as God, right? And even the people that had no education, they knew who God was in their heart. They saw Jesus and they saw what he was doing. They knew, oh, that guy, that's who God is. God is one who heals, and God is one who helps, and God is one who sacrifices himself for others. That's who God is. That was their experience of God. So the people who killed Jesus did it because they didn't know God enough to recognize him. And so many of us today turn away from God because we don't know Jesus. We don't know what Jesus looks like. We don't reflect on Jesus in the sacraments. We don't reflect on Jesus in the Eucharist or in the people that we see on the street or that we meet, our neighbors and our friends and even ourselves, right? So kind of going back to the beginning, we don't recognize Jesus, so we don't know who God is. And we don't know who God is, so we can't trust God's going to provide for us. And we don't trust God's going to provide for us, so we're never comfortable with what we have, and even with giving away the things that we think we need, because we don't trust that God's going to provide. And we're not comfortable with ourselves, and with what we have, so we don't share it. And we can't live in that community that is talked about in Acts, where they were living for the community and they were giving of themselves. And so that was kind of, so that idea of again, like community in the first reading, and of love and obedience. We can't be obedient to someone that we don't know, right? We're not going to be obedient to God if we don't know who God is. or who Jesus is. And so it just all seems to, for me, it really seems to point to, like Thomas, what does it take for us to believe in Jesus? What are the things that we need to see in order to believe in Jesus the way that Thomas and the 12 ended up believing in Jesus, for us to get to know God and to trust that he's going to provide and to be able to just give of ourselves and of what we have. That's kind of how they all kind of link together in my head.
It makes sense, and I think that leads, at least in my way of thinking, it leads us back to the dire need that we have for prayer, the dire need that we have as individuals and as community for constant prayer in our lives, because it's through that prayer that we feel God's love, that we are immersed in his love, that we are guided to what is my mission, where am I supposed to be expending myself, or how am I supposed to be sharing that love that I'm receiving from God at all times, but I'm not always aware of it if I don't have God in my center. If I don't, at those times of my life when I push him aside because I'm too busy, then I lose touch of exactly what you're saying. I lose touch. I lose track of that experience of being basking in God's love and being able to feel that generosity of heart and that willingness to go out of my way to help my neighbor, which is the sacrifice of the first Christians, the way they lived.
Yeah.
But it's a cycle, one way or the other. Either you're feeding it constantly or you're not, and then it becomes a vicious cycle of distancing and of sheltering yourself, and therefore separating yourself from others and their needs because you're so consumed with your own needs or wants or desires and whatever else that we get into in our materialism as we turn away from God. So it's something that we need to be aware of today and tomorrow and the next day and throughout the day. And that's hard for our human minds, for my human mind, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially when you get busy, when you get, like, I'm on spring break right now, right? Or Easter break rather. And like, so I have time to do stuff and to maintain the rituals that I set up in Holy Week and on Easter, and that's really cool. When work starts and school starts again, am I gonna keep doing them? Because if I don't, then I know that I'm gonna forget. I'm gonna forget a little bit about Jesus. I'm gonna forget a little bit about God, and so like, you know, that cycle that you're talking about, of kind of coming to God and then going away from God, and coming to God and going away from God. And I think that if like someone's watching, right, and you've never actually gone to the part of the cycle where you came to God, you know, and then you fell away, maybe you just like never really experienced that, then you got to do that prayer that, I don't know if Thomas Merton said it or who said it, like God, grant me the desire to desire you. Like, help me even wanna come to you, because I don't necessarily even want to come to you, you know, and it's really hard when you're there because it's, you know, you feel that lack, and you feel that, like, that emptiness, and you feel that kind of, something's missing in my life, but you don't even know what it is, and you don't even know how to fill it at all. So you kind of go back and forth doing other things.
Yeah, you start looking at the wrong places to fill it, or assuming that maybe another person can fill it, and that doesn't work.
Yeah, right, exactly. So maybe that's the prayer the rhetorical prayer to do at the end of this, or at some point this week, to just keep praying that we keep desiring God, and that we keep doing the things that we need to do to remind us to keep desiring God.
It reminds me of that song in that old Christian musical, Godspell. You know, day by day, God, bring me closer to you. Make me nearer, you know, bring me nearer to you. Let me follow you closer.
Oh, yeah.
And that is And it isn't until you experience what you were saying, that falling away, that you realize just how important that is. That it be a day-by-day process.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the song is actually called Day by Day.
Yes, it is.
Cool. So with that, I wish that for everybody and everybody watching and people not watching, and maybe there's a couple rituals that you guys want to set up in today or in the next following days to help you remember who God is to you, who Jesus is to you, and to make it harder to forget as the days go on and things get busier. So with that, I'll say have a great week and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye, Mom.
Ciao.